Mr. President, I come to talk about another issue of immigration that concerns me in North Carolina, but I think it's something that every American should be concerned with. It's the sanctuary policies that have been implemented in counties and cities and, at least in one case, statewide. The concern that we have, sanctuary cities sounds like a great concept, as the United States is a sanctuary for so many people that seek it to immigrate to. But the sanctuary cities policy is actually a policy that is breaking down the relationship between federal authorities and local authorities that I think is dangerous and could potentially cause serious consequences in communities. And not only potentially, I'll use a few examples. In North Carolina, over the past year, we've had over 500 people released who were arrested by local authorities, many of them for serious crimes, charged with murder, rape, indecent liberties with a child, heroin trafficking, a very, very long list. In cities just 25 minutes from where I live, down in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. They're arresting people not because they're simply illegally present. In fact, you can find virtually no instance where a local authority would arrest somebody just because they know that they're illegally present. The people that are in these jails have been charged with a crime, and in many cases, a serious crime. In Mecklenburg County, 2 weeks ago, the Mecklenburg County Sheriff had made the decision to release 4 people, 1 charged with murder, 2 charged with indecent liberties with a minor, 1 charged with heroin trafficking. They were illegally present, but they weren't in jail because they had simply crossed the border or had a visa expire. They were in jail because they committed a serious crime. Now, when Immigration and Customs Enforcement hears about these folks who have been detained, they issue what they call a detainer order. That's a request to hold that person in jail for at least 48 hours so that ICE can go to the prison or go to the jail, interview them, and determine whether or not they want to transfer them into ICE custody and potentially deport them. This is a very dangerous policy that's actually ultimately resulted in other people being harmed. So think about that person charged with rape or that person charged with murder or that person charged with heroin trafficking released. They go back into the community and they cause harm to someone else. What I've decided we need to do is at least provide a private right of civil action to a victim of that unwise decision. So if that charged murderer or heroin trafficker goes out and assaults someone or murders someone, or in some cases, someone who has DWI and charged with vehicular homicide goes back out and harms someone else in another, say, automobile accident under the influence, I think that that person who gets harmed, or sadly their survivor, should be able to bring a case against that governmental entity that has a sanctuary policy. Now, for those who think sanctuary policies are safe and they're only releasing safe people, this shouldn't be an issue to them, right? Because no harm's going to occur. But if harm occurs, I believe that the victim should have a right to seek restitution. So our bill is fairly simple. It's called the Justice for Victims of Sanctuary Cities Act. It's a bill that says if you, as a governmental entity, refuse to cooperate with ICE and you release someone who does harm to someone else, then that person has the right to sue that governmental entity. Now, our governments in the United States, and local governments and state governments, have the right to say that they're immune, that they can't be sued. And they have that right, and I respect that right. But if they refuse to allow themselves to build their case in court to say that what they did was appropriate and safe, then it should come at the consequence of federal funding that they should otherwise be qualified for. Now, again, if sanctuary cities are safe and all we're doing is releasing people who are not a threat to the community, this should be a non-issue for any sanctuary jurisdiction. It would only be an issue if a victim gets created as a result of their political decision. And that's why we've introduced the Justice for Victims of Sanctuary Cities. And in fact, we listened to some of the sanctuary jurisdictions that said, well, we could get in legal trouble if we hold them for 48 hours. And for that reason, we release them after a judge has ordered their release. We've got another bill that addresses that problem so that that liability will go away. We're hearing what they have to say and trying to address it in additional legislation. But I think that this is a bill that makes sense, and I think it's something that law enforcement, county commissions, and city councils should take a look at. I think they should work with ICE. Here's the last reason why I think working with ICE is very important. ICE has a legal responsibility to pursue these people if they're released by the local government. So here's what happens. You release somebody who's charged with murder, or vehicular homicide, or heroin trafficking, or rape. You release them in the community, ICE has to go pursue them in the community. So instead of allowing ICE to go into a jail and have a safe transfer from one jail into the ICE detainee system, they've got to actually create a task force. They've got to go into a community and they've got to apprehend them. They have a statutory responsibility for doing that. And ironically, in some of those instances, the very law enforcement agency that released them now has to go into the field and back them up if it's a dangerous situation when they're trying to apprehend this person that ICE has a legal responsibility for apprehending. So I think this is a common sense bill. Hopefully it's one that will give sanctuary cities some pause before they release somebody charged with murder or rape or heroin trafficking, a potentially dangerous person back in the community that the federal authorities have to pursue no matter what. So, Mr. President, I ask, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Judiciary be discharged from further consideration of Senate 2059 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.